It's your boy, the ultimate. And before I get started, I just wanted to apologize. In my rush to end the last video, I had accidentally left out the last chapter for the last part I was reading. So, Peaceful had 3 parts and not 2. So it was supposed to end on chapter 47. So I apologize about that. Thankfully, my power didn't end up going out. So I was able to, still get the video out. But so today we're going to be reading chapters 47 through 55. And I apologize if I don't seem as enthusiastic about it as I usually do. I promise you I'm still very excited to read it, and I'll probably perk up during it, but I'm just a little tired. I've been really busy lately, which is also why this video is coming out on Sunday instead of, Saturday when I usually upload. But I'm gonna move my uploads to Sunday because that's when I'll have the time to record like videos like this on Saturdays. And I'll probably shorten it from like 5 parts to maybe 3 or 4, depending on how long the parts are. But we'll see when we get there. But it's still gonna be consistently once a week. So I guess we get started. Let's make sure my charger doesn't make a whole bunch of noise. Okay, I'm sorry if that was super loud. Okay, so right now we are on chapter 47, Peaceful, part 3. I woke up the next morning to my baby dragon licking furiously at my face. I'm up, Sylvie, I'm up. She was hopping up and down on top of me, a feeling of excitement radiating from her. I thought of Tess. I had never thought I would miss being woken up by her Spartan methods. I wonder how she's doing. Tess had become my closest friend growing up, and while she had turned a bit fierce, she was still the same kind-hearted Tess that worried about me and took care of me while I was in Eleanor. I took a quick shower, dragging my smelly dragon with me. She cried in distress at the warm water drenching her, but I didn't relent, and soon after, we were both sparkly clean. Cue, Sylvie moaned and plopped down on my bed, exhausted from struggling. Don't complain. Both of us were filthy, and we didn't wash yesterday either. I heard a knock on my door, so I quickly put on the rest of my clothes. Coming, I said, my shirt all over my head. Opening the door, I looked down to spot a shy Eleanor, looking down, with her foot rubbing something on the ground. Well, hello there, Ellie. I squatted down so I was at eye level with her, giving her the gentlest smile I could muster. Good morning, brother. Mama told me to wake you up, she muttered, her head still down. I see. Thank you very much, little sister, I exclaimed while patting her head. This seemed to get a good response out of her as she started blushing a little. Can you take me down to the kitchen? I asked, holding out my hand. Sure. She nodded excitedly, and while she hesitated for a second, she grabbed my hand and pulled me along. Sylvie followed behind us, trotting while taking a look around at her new surroundings. I met with a pleasant smell of bacon as we entered the kitchen. Inside, I spotted Tabitha and my mother cooking something as they chatted. Lilia was sitting down at the table already, her legs swinging, obviously waiting for breakfast. Good morning, Mom, and Sylvie echo. Ellie managed to wake you up. I remember having the hardest time waking you up, even when you were a baby, Art. I swear you slept like a log. My mother chuckled as she placed some eggs into a large plate. Did you sleep well? Smiled Tabitha as she tossed the bowl of salad she had in her hands. I slept great, Mrs. Elstia. Hi, Ellie. Good morning, Arthur, Lilia softly said as her voice trailed off after meeting my gaze. I smiled and returned the greeting. Breakfast was great. Mother mentioned that usually the maids were the ones to cook, but she wanted to cook for me today. It had been so long since I had Mother's cooking, and now I realized how dearly I'd missed it. I made sure to give some of the meat to Sylvie, who didn't hesitate to gobble whatever entered her mouth, including my finger. Eventually, Ellie and Lilia both wanted to try feeding her, so I told them to go ahead. Needless to say, Sylvie warmed up to both of them a bit more after being fed by them. The carriage is waiting out front, so just leave the dishes in the sink and let's head out, announced Tabitha. Cyrus was an amazing city. I couldn't help but stare at the different sights that came into view as we traveled down the main road. I could see magic shops, armories, spell books, and even beast core shops. There was everything a mage could ask for. Adults and children were dressed extravagantly, while luxurious carriages passed alongside ours. Some buildings were several stories high, making the city seem a lot bigger and denser than Ashburn. I could also see children a couple years older than me, all wearing similar uniforms, some black, some gray, and some red. I could only assume by their pretentious demeanor that they were students of Cyrus Academy. While uniforms in my old world were meant to protect financial backgrounds to lessen discrimination, here it seemed that the uniforms themselves worked as a sort of gold medallion that they could show off to the rest of the world. We eventually reached the fashion district of Cyrus. It was here I learned that shopping for clothes with females took a harder toll on my body than training with Grandpa Virion, and even the thought of his training regimen had left me in a cold sweat. I was used as a mannequin for each of the girls' own preferences and style. My mother wanted to dress me in simple clothes, while Tabitha wanted to transform me into some sort of prince. Even Lilia and Ellie made me try on some clothes. You need to look good since you're my brother, she announced loudly, her hands on her hips. Sylvie could feel the exhaustion radiating from me, so she comfortingly perched on my head, as if to gloat. I ended up with 10 different sets of clothes, half from my mother and the other half from Tabitha. Both Mother and I tried to stop Tabitha from buying me anything, but she scolded us, playfully saying with a wink, "Just think of it as an investment. Besides, I've always wanted a son." We looked around more after towing our bags of clothes into the carriage. I was excited to see the armory. I had really wanted a decent sword to start practicing swordsmanship again. It was apparent that my skills diminished after such a long break from proper training. The girls didn't want that though, and I was forced to go into different jewelry and gem stores instead. I guess I would have to visit the armory with Father next time. Eventually, we arrived back home, my physical and mental strength depleted by the time Father came back home soon after. "How was your day, son?" He chuckled, taking a seat next to me on the dining table. "I never thought shopping could be so utterly tiring," I groaned. As if hearing my complaints, Vincent and Tabitha sat down across from us. "Ha ha, I heard you got beat up by a bunch of women today, Arthur," Vincent exclaimed. I just feebly nodded while Tabitha smirked and exchanged looks with my mother. "The little prodigy of yours isn't as big of a deal as I thought he was." Lilia and Ellie giggled at this. I will admit that a woman's endurance cannot be matched when they're out shopping. I just wryly refuted. My father and Vincent laughed harder at this and nodded their heads in agreement. The sound of a doorbell followed by a couple of knocks got everyone's attention. Looks like she's here. Vincent perked up. The look on everyone else's face told me that Vincent was the only one who knew what was going on. Vincent came back, leading an elderly woman into the dining room. I know exactly who this is. Oh my god. Ray, Alice, Arthur. I know you guys said that you want to put off school for later, but I just couldn't hold it in. Everyone, meet Cynthia Goodsky. She's the director of Cyrus Academy. Yo. Noticing the slight twinge of annoyance on my face, Vincent said immediately, "Don't worry, I didn't bring her here to make you go to school right away. I just wanted her to meet you." The director gave me a smile that I couldn't quite understand the meaning of, and held out her hand. "Nice to finally meet you, Arthur." Oh my god, okay, so we're finally introduced to Cynthia Goodsky. This one is definitely an interesting and complicated character. She's also very important as well. So, I'm glad we're, I don't know, I'm trying not to gush too much before, reading further, because I don't want to accidentally spoil something for you guys, so, I'll just keep reading. Shut up. Okay. Next is Chapter 48, Proclamation, Part 1. Cyrus Academy, an institution hailed as the most exalted sanctuary for any of the would-be mages, privileged enough to have both the background and talent to enter. There were several other academies scattered throughout the kingdom of Sapin, but needless to say, the level between those second-rate schools and Cyrus was insurmountable. That was the kind of titan Cyrus Academy was. Those who qualified to graduate from this academy were guaranteed a prosperous future and life. It was rumored that the top graduates could even become honored guards, instructors, or military leaders for the royal family, and for the king of the entire race of humans on this continent. Of course, some chose to go the humbler route and focused on research by joining one of the mage guilds. However, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that students of Cyrus Academy were hailed as the true elites, even among nobles. Now here I was, standing in front of the Academy's director. Normally, any 8-year-old, hell, any person, would be ecstatic to be in the presence of someone so affluent, but I couldn't help but let out an expression of annoyance at the unexpected guest. She was a very tall lady, standing around 1.7 meters, well above the average for females here. She held herself in a very upright, poised manner. She wore a simple yet elegant robe of navy blue laced with gold threading. She sported a conjurer's hat, an accessory that looked like an oversized traffic cone that amplified the absorption rate of the surrounding mana, but oftentimes came with other functions. Strapped to the side of her robe was a wand that was a crystalline white color, with a fluorescent gem attached. Even my ignorant eyes could tell that this wand was extremely valuable. Surprisingly, her face had very soft features that reminded me more of a friendly grandmother next door, rather than an all-important figure of power. But the aura she had around her made her seem fairy-like, her wrinkles unable to mask the attractive face that she had. The crow's feet etched on the outer ends of her brown eyes actually amplified the attractiveness of her smile when she introduced herself. "Nice to finally meet you, Arthur," she said, holding her hand out. What was I supposed to do in this situation? Was I supposed to shake it, or is someone of power like her expecting me to kiss her hand or something? I just went with the safe route and shook her hand. Nice to meet you too, Director. director seemed a little taken aback by my introduction. Arthur, you're being rude. I'm so sorry for my son, Director Goods Guy. He just returned home and is ignorant about formal customs. My mother pushed my head down with her hand while bowing herself, getting on one knee. Apparently, when meeting someone of high standing, it was customary to get on one knee and shake the hand while bowing. How stupid. No, it's quite alright. No offense taken at all. And please, Arthur, call me Cynthia. She let out a polite laugh with her free hand covering her mouth. I'm sorry to intrude on you at such a late time, but unfortunately, the only free time I could make was after my meeting tonight. I hope you don't mind, she explained, looking at my parents. No, we're thankful that you'd be willing to take the time out just to visit our son. My father was the one to speak this time. By the amount of formality, I'd started wondering if this granny could compare to Grandpa Varian. Director Cynthia nodded at this. True, it isn't very often that I take a house trip to visit a potential student. Otherwise, even with 100 bodies, I wouldn't be able to fit the time. However, Vincent is a good friend and has contributed greatly to Cyrus Academy, so when he had excitedly come up to me about a prodigy that is living in his home, I couldn't help but get excited as well. I must say that my curiosity got the best of me. Do you mind leading me to an open space so I can see a demonstration? She continued on, her gaze fixed at me in an assessing manner. Can I at least eat it? Ow! My mother slapped me in the butt before I could finish my sentence. Of course, please follow us, Director Cynthia. My mother ushered me, leading Director Cynthia while the rest followed. My dinner. Sylvie, who had been hiding underneath the dinner table from the unfamiliar human, trotted behind me, causing Director Cynthia to raise an eyebrow. Oh my, what a lovely mana beast. I assume it is your contracted beast, Arthur. She asked me inquisitively while kneeling down to get a closer view of Sylvie. Yeah, she hatched a few months ago. Her name is Sylvie. I simply responded, my mother's hand still grabbing onto the back of my shirt to keep me from escaping. I have to say, while it is common for nobles to buy beasts to contract, I have never seen a mana beast like yours. Shrugging my shoulders, I explained, I'm not exactly sure what she is either. Her mother seemed to be some sort of skilled wolf-like creature. She was already gravely wounded when I stumbled into her nest. She was protecting her egg. She reached to pet Sylvie, but she scampered away and climbed on top of my head. Sorry, she's a bit shy around strangers. I see. Well, enough about her. Let us see if what Vincent said wasn't just exaggeration. He didn't tell me much except that you're an augmenter, saying the rest would be a surprise. She let out a wry smile, making Vincent blush. We arrived at the backyard, and everyone took seats, giving us enough space. Sylvie struggled to escape the grasp of my little sister, whom I entrusted her with. You're not going to use your wand, I started stretching. It isn't very fair of me to be using a weapon when you yourself are empty-handed as well, right? She gave me a wink. She made a solid point. I stomped my right foot into the ground, and a piece of the ground the size of my body thrusted up. My hands were lazily stuffed in my pockets, so I kicked the rock in Director Cynthia's direction. A wind wall appeared instantly in front of her, knocking up the rock I had just kicked high into the air. Ooh, instant casting. I guess she wasn't just a director that sat in front of her desk signing papers. Her brows raised in surprise by the sudden attack I threw at her, but she quickly composed herself. I could tell she hadn't been expecting an elemental attack from me, especially since she knew I was an augmenter. I willed a gust of wind underneath my feet and propelled myself towards her. Her expression grew even more surprised as I easily jumped up 3 meters into the air. With the help of my wind as a swirling whirlwind enveloped my right fist. Using the boulder that had just been knocked up by the director as a foothold, I kicked off it to gain enough momentum to hopefully break through her barrier. The collision of our two spells created an erratic current of wind, forcing the audience to cover themselves. The collision blew me back, but Director Cynthia remained steady on her feet. Before I was able to recompose myself, the director had already finished her next move, as gusts of wind swirled and shaped themselves into 4 twisters the size of small trees. Without even a visible command from her, the twisters shot themselves toward me. Gathering wind attribute mana around me, I willed a small tornado to form around me, spinning the opposite direction of Director Goodsky's spell. Using the centrifugal force generated by my cyclone, I began spinning along with it, using my hands to create planes of wind. The clash between the 4 twisters and my cyclone created a small crater, but otherwise didn't do me any harm besides making me very dizzy. Impressive. Seems like I'll have to take you just a bit more seriously. Instantly, I'm knocked back, my ears ringing and my vision unsteady. She was a deviant, a sound mage at that. I steadied myself, taking a glance at my opponent, who was staring back at me with a mildly impressed expression on her face. My head began spinning, trying to think of different possible moves I could take to win, but she had me in a checkmate. Suppressing my pride and stubbornness, I took a seat on the ground, admitting defeat. That should be enough for a demonstration, right, Director? I rubbed my temples. Yes, that is quite sufficient, she muttered. There was a long pause as she began studying me with a newly found interest. She regained her senses and made her way towards me when I heard my father's voice. Arthur, you know how to use earth and wind attribute spells as well. What do you mean, as well? Director Cynthia interrupted, her composed look turning into a look of confusion. My mother continued on from my baffled father. My son, we thought he was a fire elemental. He's a deviant as well that can use lightning magic. I could hear Director Cynthia's breath turn short, and for the first time gave an expression of someone truly in shock. Surely you jest. You mean to say that he is capable of controlling 3 elements? 4, actually. I can control all 4. I cut in. Everyone was going to find out anyway. This wasn't something that I could nor wanted to hide. I love, stories when the main character ends up doing more than people expect them to be able to do. It's so entertaining. Especially in this case, considering how rare quadra-elemental mages are. And Arthur's so good at it, I guess that's what happens when you, awaken at such an early age. Or when you have the mind of a grown man and can grasp the concept of magic in whatever new world you end up in. Or, I don't know. Chapter 49, Proclamation, Part 2. Earth and wind are my weakest elements. I'm a lot more adept in controlling fire and water. I also happen to be deviants in both those elements, although I have just begun training in them. I got up to my feet, shaking off my dizziness from the previous attack. I wasn't expecting a sound user, so I didn't bother enhancing my ears. The director was quite cruel, though. If my body hadn't gone through assimilation, my hearing would have been quite damaged. No one responded back to what I had just said, the only sound nearby being the cliched chirps of crickets. It was understandable that they'd be this surprised, but I was getting tired of the shocked expressions. I mean, what do you expect them to do? I don't know. The noble figure that controlled the most prominent school on the continent seemed to me like sheer joy. Finally, turning back to me, she said, "Arthur, if I may repeat, you are a quadra element capable of controlling two higher elements, correct? I'm also a dragon tamer, but that's about it." I wonder how they would react if I told them that. "Correct," I immediately answered, not bothering to elaborate. "Please demonstrate." Director Cynthia's eyes grew menacing, and the once friendly grandmother now had the look of a veteran killer as she raised her hand, the mana around her fluctuating. Suddenly, a vacuum of wind began sucking me towards her as a visible sphere of wind formed in her other palm. This woman. I willed water into my right palm and a condensed ball of fire in my left. She wanted to see so badly, I just have to show her. Combining the two opposing skills together, I created a massive cloud of steam, completely enshrouding the both of us from everyone else's sight. The cloud of steam didn't last long against the wind mage, but it did give me enough time for me to create a spear of ice. I quickly repositioned myself after throwing the spear of ice just as the steam dissipated. As expected, the director easily blocked my ice spear just before I was in range to land a fist encased in lightning. However, just like before, I was blown away by a powerful sound wave. Fortunately, I had reinforced mana over my ears, but there was no way for me to get near her. Whew, I must say that I'm thoroughly convinced. "You pass, Arthur Lewin." She clapped her hands, breaking the silence. Getting back up, I dusted myself off. This demonstration had left me with a mixture of feelings. I was frustrated on one hand that there were figures I couldn't even touch, let alone defeat. However, for the first time, I began seriously considering the potential value of learning at Xyrus. If I could have a professor that was on a level near Director Goodsky, my magic would make leaps and bounds. "Sorry for hiding this from you guys," I said, turning to my parents. I was a bit worried that my parents might be angry for keeping this from them, but fortunately my father took it pretty well. "My son is the first ever quadra elemental mage. He scooped me up by my armpits and swung me around like he did when I was an infant." Suddenly, the traumatic memories began popping back up. "Please, Art, no more secrets." My mother just wryly smiled, concern still etched on her face. I couldn't promise her that, but I'd like to believe it was for her protection, not for my convenience. Forget a quadra elemental. In this continent, there aren't even any tri-elementals, but you, Art. Tabitha chimed in, her voice trailing into a sigh. "Is brother strong?" My sister chimed in, still clutching on to Sylvie, patting her head. The director nodded. "Your brother has the ability to become very strong, little one." She had a proud look on her face, as if she was the one getting complimented. Vincent's face was still a picture of disbelief, as he still was in the middle of processing everything. As Lilia made sure her father was alright, she took a quick glance towards my direction with a mixture of astonishment and a little fear on her face. I didn't blame her. My father set me down and I turned to Director Cynthia, giving her a stern gaze. A gaze that I knew didn't fit an 8-year-old. "Director Goodsky, there's actually a reason I didn't hide my capabilities today." Picking up on the seriousness in my voice, she nodded in understanding. "I had a hunch that you weren't just brazenly showing off your skills, Arthur. You seem too sharp for that." Agreeing with her, I responded, "There are only a few benefits I can gain from attending your school. One is learning how to utilize my lightning and ice elements. However, that's something I can learn on my own with due time. No, the main reason I would attend your academy, if I chose to at all, is for protection. Right now, I'm not strong enough to protect everyone. However, you will position of power and influence that can provide safety for my family and I, at least until I can gain the strength to protect them myself. Arthur, you're being rude to Director Goodsky. How can you? No, it's fine, Alice. Immediately after she said this, the director mumbled a soft chant before speaking again. Arthur, I believe you hold the ability to make changes in this world. For that, if you're willing to attend Cyrus Academy and become a rightful citizen that will do anything to protect this land, then I will abide by any criteria you set. Director Goodsky's voice was clear and determined. Very well. I will learn what I feel is valuable from the classes your school offers and train my own powers. As long as you give me the tools and freedom to do so, as well as keep my loved ones safe, then I will consider you as an important benefactor, I promised. Director Goodsky's lips curved up into a smile as we shook hands. At this, I was suddenly able to hear the voices of everyone else again. Looking at the director, she gave me a wink. By the confused looks of everyone around us, I could only assume that what Director Goodsky had done was make everyone else unable to hear our voices. Clarifying for everyone who couldn't hear, I said aloud, I will abide by our agreement when I enroll in the academy. Oh, were you not planning on enrolling into my academy anytime soon? The director, as well as every other adult, had looks of puzzlement on their faces. I don't plan on entering Cyrus Academy until I would be of normal age to actually attend. No, I've decided to enter your academy on my 12th birthday, a very average age for one to enter your academy. I assume that will not be a problem. I tilted my head. Goodness, that's in a little over 3 years. Arthur, do you have any plans on what to do until then? I figured Director Goodsky wouldn't be so accepting on prolonging my education for over 3 years. I turned to face my parents again, since it was up to them to allow me or not. I looked up at the night sky, stars shining. Unlike my old world, the lack of bright lights truly made the star-glittered night beautiful. Turning my gaze back to where my family was, I answered, I'd like to become an adventurer. Oh boy, we're about to get into a really, really good arc. I was about to say this is probably one of my favorite arcs, but I would literally be saying that about every arc in this book, so I'm just not gonna say it. Oh man, I'm so excited. This arc is really good. It introduces a lot more characters, and you really get to see Arthur do some stuff. Oh my god, I can't wait to get back. I can't wait to get into it. It's gonna be so great. No, absolutely not. No way. Arthur, do you know how dangerous it is to become an adventurer? You've just gotten back after we all thought you were dead, and now you're saying you want to go get yourself killed out there. No way. Absolutely not. My mother was on the verge of tears while she said this. She had never been good at controlling her emotions. Eleanor was beside her, clutching onto her leg. Mama, don't be angry. Brother not a bad person. Mama, don't cry. Director Goodsky had left the manor after my announcement. I could tell she still wanted to ask me a lot of questions, but we excused ourselves to have a family talk. We were currently inside my parents' room with my mother standing up in front of me, forbidding me to even think about doing anything remotely dangerous. Father was a bit more rational. I could tell he didn't like the idea as well, but he couldn't really see any reason for me not to be an adventurer besides my age. I wasn't going to debate with my mother. She was saying all of this because she was worried, and I could never blame her for that. It was something I had expected, and I wanted to slowly ease her into the idea, but the meeting with Director Goodsky threw the timing off of everything. silent the whole time, my father finally spoke up. Honey, let's hear Arthur out at least. I'm not saying I agree to him becoming an adventurer, but don't you think we should at least listen to what he has to say? How can you still say that after what happened that day? My mother yelled, breaking down into a fit of sobs. I looked to my father for answers, curious about what she was talking about, but he simply shook his head and comforted my mother. It seemed like a good hour before she had calmed down enough for us to speak again. I grabbed my mother's hands. Mom, I wasn't planning on leaving tomorrow. I was looking forward to spending a few months at home with you guys. She was still silent, but her face softened a little at that, and I just gave her a warm smile. Sylvie followed suit and began licking her hand. What I meant by becoming an adventurer was gaining some experience. After being in the Elf Kingdom for 3 years, I missed a lot about what I should know about this world of ours. I just thought that becoming an adventurer would be the best way to gain some practical experience. I urged, not letting go of Mother's hands. I understand where you're coming from, Arthur. Although I was a bit older, I was also itching to get some real-life experience in fighting as soon as I awakened as a mage. Father reminisced. But your mother is also right in that it is dangerous and unpredictable. My mother nodded her head vigorously at this. I stayed silent for a little bit as I pondered. Dad, Mom, what if I were to have some sort of guard or supervisor with me? Would that make you feel a bit more at ease with this whole idea? You know, that's not a bad idea. I could almost see the gears in my father's head wind as he began thinking of potential candidates. But I still won't be able to see you for 3 years. My mother began to protest again. Shaking my head, I said to her, Mom, I'm not going to go on long trips or go on dangerous missions to faraway places. I'll try to come back every few months, maybe even more frequently than that, depending on what I do. Brother, are you leaving? My sister wore an expression as if she had just been told that Santa didn't exist. Actually, does something like Santa exist in this world? I actually don't know. That's weird. That might have been something from his previous life, because he did say he lived on Earth. But it seems like it was like a dystopian future of some kind. I started to panic. No, Ellie, I'm staying here. You'll be seeing your brother a lot from now on, okay? Apparently, both my mother and father had told Eleanor a lot of stories about me and how strong and smart I was. One of Ellie's favorite bedtime stories was how I saved Mother from a bunch of bad guys on top of a cliff, and that I got hurt so it'd take me some time to come back home. Eventually, I had become some sort of hero to my sister. I looked back at my mother. Her face was considerably more at ease after talking about this. I guess she had just assumed the worst case scenario and thought I wanted to slay the world's strongest evil at the age of 8 or something. Why did you want to be an adventurer before even going to school anyways? Wasn't it usually the opposite? My mother softly muttered. Dad's reason was a part of it. I wanted to test my skills out in real life situations. Also, Mom, I want to at least try to fit in with everyone when I go to school. It would be a lot harder to fit in if I began school at the age of 8. I don't think I'll be able to make many friends with such a big age difference. It was a very pitiful excuse, but for once, my mother gave me a look of understanding. I guess it was a mother's worst nightmare for her child to become a loner. Damn, my mom must have been in hell then. Just kidding. It wasn't a complete lie, because I said it thinking of Sylvia's dying wish. She had wanted me to enjoy life and have a life, not just of training. This was a promise that I planned on keeping no matter what. Besides, I'm gonna be here for a couple of months anyway. Who knows? Maybe you'll get sick of me by then and throw me out before I even get the chance to leave. I winked at my mother. That earned me a thump on the head, but she chuckled as well. You're just like your father at times like these. Thank God you at least have my intelligence. She gave me a big hug, leaving me with a warm feeling that I still wasn't used to. Hey, what was that about my intelligence? He was gifted with my adept abilities in fire, too, my father protested. My son got his deviant powers from me. Mother just turned me away from my father and stuck her tongue out at him. Ellie, too. Bleh. My sister copied my mother and stuck her tongue out at my devastated father. No one's on my side, he playfully cried, trying to hug his daughter, leaving us all in a fit of laughter. Dude, the Lewin family is so precious. They're so precious. I just want them to be protected and happy at all times. Oh my goodness. I love them so much. Also, I'm not gonna read 53 through 55 tonight because I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm slurring my words a little bit because I'm still kind of exhausted. So I'll save 53 to 55 for next time, and I'll just finish up chapter 51 and 52. I know I broke up the chapters last time as well, but I want to make sure you guys actually understand the story instead of just listening to me babble and talk nonsensical English because I'm tired. So yeah, so 2 more chapters to go and then I'll end it there. Chapter 51. Everybody Wins, Part 2. The next day was a Sunday, leaving my father with the day off. Both the Lewin and Helstia family were dining together for breakfast. So, did you guys settle on what to do about Arthur? Vincent asked, half chewing on his omelet. Tabitha shook her head. I swear, sometimes I have such a hard time believing you're a noble with your horrible dieting habits, dear. Don't worry, at least your husband's better than mine. Remember that one dinner party where Reynolds spit out his food from laughing so hard? I had to use Ellie as an excuse to leave the table because I was so embarrassed. My mother just sighed. Anyways, yes, after talking about it yesterday night, we agreed to let him become an adventurer under some conditions. Vince, my father just lightly blushed as he tried to switch back the topic. Oh, what conditions? Responded the curious Tabitha as she cut the omelet into smaller pieces for Lilia. He's not going to become an adventurer until after his birthday, which is in 3 months. We also decided on having a guard with him on his missions. Besides that, I feel like he'll be smart enough to manage the rest on his own. Of course, the last condition is that I'll be visiting as often as possible. My father explained, working on the rest of his roast beef. Do you have anyone in mind for who this guard is gonna be? Heck, is there even a guard that's capable of guarding him? I feel like Arthur would be the one protecting the guard. He just chuckled at the ridiculousness of an 8-year-old protecting a grown veteran adventure. My mother answered him, looking at my father. We haven't really thought of a person that fits the criteria. Ray and I thought we could use one of the Helstia auction guards, but we couldn't really come up with anyone. Can I have more omelet, please? My sister chimed in with her fork raised in the air. I got it. My father stood up from a sudden revelation, making me almost choke on the piece of meat that was in my mouth. The twin horns will be coming back from an expedition in a dungeon soon. I received a letter from the Adventurer Guild Hall that says they should be back within 2 months. It's perfect. Why so long for me to think of this. We can just have one of the twin horns look after you. Arthur, you still remember them, right? My father's eyes shined in excitement. Hey, that's not a bad idea, my mother said from the kitchen, her voice implying the rarity in my father having a good idea. Handing a piece of meat to Sylvie, who was perched on my lap with her 2 front paws on the table, I responded to, "Of course I remember them. That sounds like a great idea, Dad. Do they know I'm back?" "No. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to send a letter to them yet. I was planning on doing that today." My father sat back down, scratching his head. Vincent chimed in on the conversation after finishing off his breakfast. "Arthur, you told Director Cynthia yesterday that you weren't going to show your powers to anyone until you enroll at Cyrus Academy, right? How are you planning on doing that while you're in adventure?" Yes, I've been meaning to get to that," I said while picking up a strawberry with my fork. "I plan on keeping my identity hidden as an adventurer. I've read that there were many members of the Adventurers Guild that went by aliases, not revealing their identities to the public. Unfortunately, since there was no way of masking the appearance of Sylvie, I would just have to do a good job of hiding her. Thankfully, she was small enough to fit inside a cloak if the pocket was big enough." "I see." Both Vincent and Tabitha nodded at this. With that, breakfast ended and we all separated. Father went to the guild hall to send a letter to his old party members, while my mother and Tabitha went shopping, taking Ellie and Lilia along with them. They asked me to come as well, but I politely declined the offer to endure the suffering they call a pastime event. I washed up and headed towards the right wing of the manor, where Vincent's office was. "Yes, it's Arthur," I answered. The door opened to reveal Vincent with a curious look on his face. Come in. What brings you in, Arthur? You've never really come into my office before." "Yes, there's a certain matter I wish to talk to you about today, which is why I visited," I said while looking around at the piles of documents on the floor and on his desk. This man Arthur's about to pull his kingly attitude. It's actually pretty hilarious how he does this sometimes when there's barely any people around, because then the person he's talking to will really be like, is this actually a child? What the hell is going on? It's pretty funny. Okay. Chapter 52. Everybody Wins, Part 3. Vincent Alstius POV. Was this child really only 8 years old? See. Shivers ran down my spine at the tone of his voice. Why was I so nervous at the mention of a certain matter you wanted to talk to me about? "What sort of matter is it?" I just asked, my face turning a bit more serious. "I would like your help in obtaining a few items that might be hard to find elsewhere." Continuing, he sat down and said with his eyes looking straight at me, "I need a sturdy hooded cloak, a robe, and a mask that can cover my entire face. It's imperative that the mask has the function of changing my voice." It wasn't hard to figure out why he wanted these items. As the owner of Elstia Auction House that attracted even the highest of nobles and even the royal family, it shouldn't be too hard to get these items. The mask might be a little tricky because a sound elemental artificer would need to be the one to make this, but it could be done. Yet, why was there such a heavy feeling in this room? I couldn't quite place my finger on it. That's it. Why was this 8-year-old child giving off the same pressure as the time I was next to the king of Zappin himself? That's because, Vincent, you are also sitting in front of another king. No, the atmosphere now was even heavier than when I was with the king. Yup. He was clearly asking me for a favor, but I felt as though he was gauging me, almost as if he was trying to evaluate where to put me on his list of people to keep alive. I had never this from him, but that was probably because I had only ever seen him with his family. I quickly replied, wanting to get it over with. Sure, it shouldn't be a problem getting those things. The mask might take a bit of time, but I'm sure we'll have it before you become an adventurer. His slight nod actually filled me with relief. I had nobles that waited in line to introduce themselves to me, but this kid... Is there anything you would need my help for in exchange? I would feel bad just for asking for this without any compensation, he responded. I felt a little sweat forming above my brows. It's fine, really. I owe your father a lot, actually. He may be working for me, but the way he treats my cars have really lessened the number of problems that happened during the auctions. This was the truth, actually. Ray had become an irreplaceable part of the Helstia auction houses. His leadership and charisma amongst the guards he trained was first class. I owed him when he saved my life, and I owed him and his family now. Even with the generous salary that was well above average and letting his family stay in our house, I still felt that it was actually a bargain on my part. Both Tabitha and Lilia have been happier now than ever after Ray moved in with Alice and had Ellie. I had always been filled with guilt for not being able to spend as much time with my family as they wanted, but things were a lot better now. Speaking of training, that actually gives me an idea, he muttered while looking down. I noticed quite a while ago that when Arthur started thinking, he had this look where his gaze focused afar and his brows furrowed. The subtle crease near his lips and the slight twitch of his nose made him appear to be thinking of something above what normal human intelligence would be capable of. It was the look of a true intellectual. It's hard to believe that he was the same age as my little Lilia. Allow me to start training your daughter to become a mage. He put down this landmine as if he was just talking about the weather. I completely forgot he did this. I'm not gonna lie. Arthur Lewin's POV. I had been meaning to start teaching my baby sister mana manipulation soon. It wouldn't be too much trouble to include Lilia in these lessons. I noticed that both you and Lady Tabitha are not mages, so it might be impossible for her to awaken by herself. But if we start now, I think she'd be able to awaken around the average age, I said. My statement was met with silence. I looked up to see Vincent drop the stack of papers he had been fumbling with nervously. His face was frozen in place as I could hear his beat hearting faster. His beat hearting faster? His heart beating faster. Can I truly believe what you just said? Can you really allow my daughter to become a mage? He asked after a seemingly long moment of silence. Sure, it'll be a long process, but it's definitely possible. I will have to ask you to keep the lessons on a low profile, though. I would hate to be bombarded with doting parents asking to make their children into mages. I just chuckled, trying to lighten up the tension. He nodded furiously after failing to form a coherent sentence. Sincerely, there would be no greater happiness than seeing my daughter become a mage. He managed to stammer out, tears on the verge of falling down. Great, then I'll leave the items we discussed to you. Now allow me to excuse myself out. Sorry for intruding in on your work. I walked myself out the room, picking up the sleeping Sylvie from my lap. I'm glad that worked out well. And honestly, Arthur, I'm glad too. Cause you're definitely gonna need those items for what you're about to be doing, bud. But man, it's like Vincent said, this dude Arthur really puts on a completely different face basically whenever he's not around his parents. And it's so crazy because the people that he ends up talking to can tell that he's not just like a normal child. They obviously don't grasp the fact that he's like a grown man and an ex-king something's off, which I always thought was cool. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me tonight. Like I said, I'm like completely exhausted, and for some reason, reading out loud really makes me tired. I don't know why. So I'm gonna end it here before I start slurring my words and ruin the entire experience. Even though I was already stammering and messing up my words before. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a good night or a good day wherever you are. If you're asleep, I hope you sleep well, and if you're awake, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next week.